Imagine waking up every morning as a child, wondering if today would be a good day with your parent. Would they beam with pride because you brought home an A+? Or would they coldly dismiss your existence because you somehow failed to meet their impossible standards? If this resonates with you, you're not alone. Countless adults who grew up with narcissistic parents live with this same haunting question. Did my parent actually love me? It's that question that keeps you up at night, even decades after leaving home. That nagging doubt that follows you into your own relationships, making you question your worthiness of love and whether you even understand what healthy love looks like. I strongly believe that understanding the complex reality of narcissistic love is the first crucial step toward healing. And that's exactly what we're going to explore today, not just with anecdotes and theories, but with the scientific research that helps explain this painful dynamic. Let's get something straight right off the bat. The way narcissists experience love is fundamentally different from healthy love. And this isn't just my opinion. It's backed by decades of psychological research. Healthy parental love is characterized by what developmental psychologists call unconditional positive regard. This concept, first established by humanistic psychologist Carl Rogers, describes an attitude of complete acceptance and support regardless of what the child says or does. It's a cornerstone of healthy development. A 2018 meta-analysis published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology examined 315 studies on parenting styles and found that this unconditional acceptance was the single strongest predictor of positive outcomes in children's emotional development and self-esteem. Children who receive this type of love develop secure attachment styles and have significantly lower rates of anxiety and depression in adulthood. In contrast, narcissistic love is conditional and self-referential. Dr. Craig Malkin, a clinical psychologist and instructor at Harvard Medical School, describes it as trophy love in his book, Rethinking Narcissism. The narcissistic parent loves what the child represents or provides rather than who they inherently are. You know how it feels, those moments when your parents' eyes would light up because your piano recital made them look good in front of their friends, followed by cold indifference once you were back home and no longer serving a purpose for their ego. Here's where things get really interesting from a scientific perspective. Narcissists don't just choose to ignore your feelings. Their brains actually process emotional information differently. Multiple neuroimaging studies have shown distinct patterns in the brains of people with narcissistic personality disorder, NPD. A 2013 study published in the journal Brain examined brain activity using functional MRI scans and found reduced gray matter in regions associated with empathy, including the anterior insula, which helps us recognize emotions in others. Another groundbreaking study from 2010 in the Journal of Psychiatric Research found that people with NPD showed significantly less activity in the right anterior insula when viewing emotional expressions compared to control groups. This region is crucial for what psychologists call affective empathy, the ability to feel what another person is feeling. Let me put this in everyday terms. When you were crying as a child, your narcissistic parent's brain literally wasn't registering your distress the same way a non-narcissistic parent's would. It's like their emotional radar had a massive blind spot, specifically in the area that should have been tuned to your feelings. I strongly believe that understanding this biological component can be liberating for many survivors. The parent's failure to respond appropriately to your emotional needs wasn't necessarily a conscious choice to hurt you. It was often the result of their own neurological limitations. Based on both clinical observations and empirical research, there are several distinct patterns that characterize narcissistic parenting. You may recognize some or all of these from your own childhood. 1. Conditional love and approval. A longitudinal study by Asser, Roth, and Deci, 2004, published in the Journal of Personality found that conditional parenting, where love and approval depend on meeting certain standards, was strongly associated with poor self-esteem and emotional regulation problems in children. Children raised with conditional love learned to suppress their authentic selves to maintain the parent's approval. You know those moments when you censored your true feelings because expressing them would risk losing your parent's affection? That's the direct result of conditional love, and it's devastating to a child's developing sense of self. Too many adults still live that way today. They literally just push back thoughts when others are present. Most times this behavioral pattern can be traced back to being raised by a self-centered parent. If you've learned something so far, subscribe to the channels. I truly appreciate it. 2. The child as a narcissistic extension. Narcissistic parents often view their children as extensions of themselves, rather than as separate individuals with their own preferences, desires, and needs. A 2014 study in the Journal of Personality Disorders found that this boundary violation was reported by 83% of adult children of parents with clinically diagnosed NPD. This manifests as the parent making decisions about your appearance, activities, and even career path without considering your preferences. Your achievements were our achievements, but your failures were entirely yours. Your parent might have pushed you toward activities that brought them vicarious glory while discouraging pursuits that genuinely interested you but didn't enhance their image. 3. Parentification and role reversal. Many children of narcissists become emotional caretakers for their parents, a phenomenon psychologists call parentification. A comprehensive 2017 study published in Child Abuse and Neglect found that parentified children were significantly more likely to develop depression, anxiety, and relationship difficulties in adulthood. This might have looked like you managing your parents' emotional states, keeping the peace in the household, or being treated as a confidant for adult problems. Perhaps you found yourself consoling your parent after their breakup while your own emotional needs went unaddressed. 4. Triangulation and family dynamics. Narcissistic parents often create unhealthy triangles in family relationships, pitting siblings against each other or creating golden children and scapegoats. Research by Basarmeni Inagi and Spark on family systems theory shows that this triangulation serves to maintain the narcissist's position of power and prevent family members from forming alliances that might challenge their authority. A 2016 study in the European Journal of Psychology found that 76% of families with a narcissistic parent exhibited these dysfunctional triangulation patterns, compared to just 13% of control families. You might have experienced this as your parent lavishing praise on one sibling while criticizing another, or subtly encouraging competition rather than cooperation among family members. 5. Gaslighting and reality manipulation. Perhaps the most insidious aspect of narcissistic parenting is gaslighting, manipulating a child to question their own reality, memory, or perceptions. A groundbreaking 2019 study in the Journal of Abnormal Psychology found that chronic exposure to gaslighting in childhood was associated with long-term cognitive effects, including memory disruption and difficulty trusting one's own perceptions. That never happened. You're too sensitive? You're making things up. These phrases are the weaponry of gaslighting, and they can make a child feel like they're losing their grip on reality. 6. Intermittent reinforcement. Narcissistic parents often provide unpredictable patterns of affection and withdrawal, creating what psychologists call intermittent reinforcement. A 2015 study in behavioral brain research demonstrated that this unpredictable pattern of reward actually creates stronger neural connections than consistent reward or punishment, explaining why children of narcissists often remain deeply attached despite the pain. This inconsistency can look like lavish praise and attention one day, followed by cold rejection the next, with the child never knowing which parent they'll encounter. 7. Narcissistic rage and emotional terrorism. When their authority or image is threatened, many narcissistic parents respond with disproportionate anger, what clinicians call narcissistic rage. A study published in the Journal of Clinical Psychology in 2020 found that exposure to narcissistic rage in childhood was associated with heightened amygdala reactivity in adulthood, essentially creating a hypervigilant nervous system constantly on alert for threats. You might remember walking on eggshells, carefully monitoring your parents' mood, and adjusting your behavior to avoid triggering their explosive anger. I strongly believe that understanding where narcissism comes from doesn't excuse harmful behavior, but it does provide context that can be healing for survivors. A landmark 2015 longitudinal study in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences followed 565 children and their parents over 20 years. The researchers found two primary pathways to the development of narcissistic traits: parental overvaluation. Children consistently told they were superior to others and entitled to special treatment were more likely to develop narcissistic traits. Early attachment trauma. Children who experience severe emotional neglect or unpredictable parenting develop narcissistic traits as a defense mechanism. Dr. Carol McBride, author of Will I Ever Be Good Enough? Healing the Daughters of Narcissistic Mothers, explains that narcissism often develops as an adaptive response to childhood trauma. The grandiosity and self-focus serve as psychological armor against feelings of worthlessness and vulnerability. It's a brutal irony. The very traits that cause so much pain for the children of narcissists often began as the narcissistic parents' desperate attempt to protect themselves from their own childhood wounds. This brings us to our central question. Do narcissists really love their children? From a neurobiological perspective, we need to understand that love isn't just a feeling. It's also a set of behaviors mediated by specific neural and hormonal systems. Healthy parental love involves the release of oxytocin, often called the bonding hormone, and activation of brain regions associated with empathy and caregiving. A 2017 study in the journal Hormones and Behavior found that parents with narcissistic traits showed reduced oxytocin responses when interacting with their children compared to non-narcissistic parents. This biological difference may help explain the characteristic emotional coldness many children of narcissists report. So, from a strictly neurobiological perspective, narcissists experience a reduced capacity for the type of bonding and empathic concern that characterizes healthy parental love. They may feel something they identify as love, but it lacks key neurological and behavioral components of what developmental psychologists consider necessary for secure attachment. Dr. Ramani Durvasula, a leading expert on narcissism, puts it this way: a narcissist's version of love is like a heat lamp. It feels warm sometimes, but it's artificial, can burn if you get too close, and ultimately, it's not the real thing. It's important to acknowledge that narcissism exists on a spectrum, and not all narcissistic parents are alike. A 2018 study in the Journal of Personality Assessment identified 3 distinct subtypes of narcissistic parenting patterns, each with different impacts on children. Grandiose exhibitionist. These parents demand admiration and special treatment. Their children typically struggle with perfectionism and fear of failure. Vulnerable/covert. These parents alternate between neediness and rejection. Their children often develop caretaking behaviors and chronic anxiety. Malignant. These parents combine narcissistic traits with antisocial behaviors. Their children show the highest rates of complex trauma symptoms and attachment disorders. A child's outcome depends not only on the type and severity of the parent's narcissism but also on protective factors like the presence of healthy adults, genetic resilience factors, and interventions. You know how some people seem to emerge from narcissistic families relatively unscathed while others struggle profoundly? This research helps explain that variation. If you're recognizing your parent or yourself in this discussion, know that healing is possible. Here are evidence-based approaches that research has shown to be effective. 1. Trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, TFCBT. A 2019 meta-analysis published in Clinical Psychology Review examined 17 randomized controlled trials and found that TFCBT was significantly effective in reducing symptoms of complex trauma related to childhood emotional abuse. This therapy helps survivors identify and challenge the negative core beliefs that formed as a result of narcissistic parenting. Beliefs like, "I'm only valuable when I achieve," or "my needs don't matter." 2. Schema therapy. Developed specifically for deep-rooted patterns stemming from childhood, schema therapy has shown promising results for adult children of narcissists. A 2017 study in the Journal of Behavior Therapy and Experimental Psychiatry found that schema therapy was particularly effective in helping people overcome the defectiveness schema common in those raised by highly critical parents. 3. Internal family systems, IFS. This approach recognizes that we all have different parts within us, some of which develop to protect us from childhood pain. A 2018 study in the Journal of Marital and Family Therapy found that IFS therapy helped participants reduce shame and self-criticism, 2 common legacies of narcissistic parenting. 4. Mindfulness-based practices. Research published in the journal Mindfulness in 2020 found that regular mindfulness practice helped survivors of childhood emotional neglect develop self-compassion and reduce rumination about past trauma. I strongly believe that these evidence-based approaches offer real hope. The same neuroplasticity that allowed your brain to adapt to a narcissistic parent's unreliable love can now help you rewire those patterns toward healing. Perhaps the most insidious legacy of narcissistic parenting is that it teaches children a distorted definition of love, one that associates love with performance, appearance, achievement, or usefulness rather than intrinsic worth. A 2018 study in the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships found that adult children of narcissistic parents were significantly more likely to enter romantic relationships with narcissistic partners, perpetuating the cycle of conditional love. Breaking free requires consciously recognizing and rejecting this flawed definition. Healthy love is not earned through performance or appearance. It doesn't disappear when you fail or disagree. It doesn't require you to contort yourself into someone else's ideal image. Dr. Lindsay Gibson, author of Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents, notes that many adult children of narcissists experience a profound emotional awakening when they first experience genuine acceptance from a friend, partner, or therapist. This experience often becomes a turning point in their recovery journey. After reviewing all the research and clinical evidence, here's what I've come to believe about the question, do narcissists really love their children? The narcissistic parent loves their child the best way they know how, through the limited emotional and neurological equipment they possess. But this form of love is fundamentally compromised, missing key elements that children need for healthy development. However, I strongly believe that focusing too much on whether your narcissistic parent loved you keeps you trapped in their emotional orbit. The more liberating question is, was the love I received sufficient and healthy? For most children of narcissists, the answer is no. And accepting this truth, painful as it is, opens the door to a profound realization. Your parent's limited capacity to love says nothing about your worthiness of love. There's something deeply healing about finally understanding that the problem was never you. The emotional neglect, the conditional approval, the criticism, none of it was because you weren't smart enough, successful enough, pretty enough, or good enough. It was because your parents' capacity to love was compromised by their own unresolved wounds and neurological limitations. As you continue your healing journey, I encourage you to consciously create your own definition of love, one based on emotional safety, mutual respect, acceptance of flaws, and celebration of uniqueness. This isn't just therapeutic advice. It's backed by research. A 2021 study in the Journal of Personality found that adults who consciously redefined love after childhood trauma showed significantly better outcomes in their own relationships than those who unconsciously carried forward their childhood models. Remember that healing isn't linear. There will be setbacks alongside progress. But with each step, you're reclaiming your right to be loved authentically and completely, not for what you achieve or provide, but simply for who you are. The child within you who longed for unconditional love deserves nothing less. And now, as an adult, you have the power to ensure they finally receive it, beginning with how you treat yourself. You're not just surviving the aftermath of narcissistic parenting. You're pioneering a new way of loving that can transform not just your life, but potentially the lives of generations to come. In the end, perhaps the most healing realization is this: whether or not narcissists can truly love their children in a healthy way is ultimately less important than your decision to break free from the cycle and learn to love yourself and others in the way you always deserve to be loved. I've worked with countless survivors of narcissistic parenting over the years, and the most profound transformation always comes when they shift their focus from understanding their parent to understanding and rebuilding themselves. This doesn't mean ignoring or minimizing the past. It means using that understanding as a foundation for creating something new and beautiful. I strongly believe that you have within you everything you need to heal. The very sensitivity that made you vulnerable to narcissistic wounds is also your greatest strength in recovery. It gives you the capacity for the deep empathy, emotional intelligence, and authentic connection that your narcissistic parent likely never experienced. Your story doesn't end with being the child of a narcissist. It continues with every choice you make to love differently, to see yourself clearly, and to create relationships based on mutual respect and genuine care. That choice to heal, to grow, to transform is yours, and it's a choice that holds the power to change everything. Thank you for watching. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.